welcome everyone, and I've invited Carissa Armstrong, who, for those of you who don't know her, is our customer support team leader from Kid Home. Now, the reason I've invited Carissa to do this brief interview is that Carissa participated in the WOW Module 1 customer service program that we ran here in Pymble. And not only did she participate, but in future dialogues between Carissa and I could tell that she could articulate really well some of the observations that she made and some of the distinctions that she made. So with that in mind, I've asked Carissa to join us for a brief interview. I'm only going to ask you 4 quick questions, Carissa. So we'll try to navigate our way through that, and we might as well get started. I'm curious, first of all, Carissa, when you participated throughout the day and you did 2 assessments on the culture and the culture of your team when it came to customer service. You did one at the beginning of the module and then one at the end of the module. What were the obvious differences between the 2 self-assessments that you did?
Well, look, the majority of the results at the end of the program, so the second assessment that we did, it scored noticeably lower than what the initial assessment scored from my perspective. So that was very surprising that there could have been such a discrepancy in those scores.
Now, without disclosing the actual scores, if you had to select one of the questions where you noticed the largest change, could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, look, out of the 11 questions, 5 had the same result, but the remaining 6 of those 11 questions had a different result. All obviously scoring lower at the end of the day. It was interesting to note too that not one of those questions scored higher at the end of the day. They either stayed the same or went lower. I guess the question that had the largest shift in the results was, do you have clear customer service values and are they documented? That was the one that stood out as far as a marking wise, that it got a significantly lower score.
Interesting. And I'm guessing that there was something in particular during that subject matter that we covered that day that made you shift from where you were to where you ended up. Do you recall what that subject matter might have been, or what the topic would have been that we discussed?
I can, because I can hear your voice, Walter. It was asking for any new employees, how do we communicate the customer service values and expectations as part of their onboarding process? You asked the question, how do we do this? And my thought process, and I don't recall if I said it out loud or not, I probably didn't, but my answer was, we currently don't. We presume that they know what customer service is. So the conversation from when we were discussing that topic was that a new employee might have a customer service background from previous roles in different companies, but we should never presume that they will know what customer service values are. And importantly, if it's not documented and discussed and practiced, how do they know they're doing the right thing? And I guess it struck home with me a little bit. Prior to working with Kid Home, my background was in hospitality. So I worked across 5-star hotels. So they were big hotels with big training budgets as well. And I'd sat through sessions called My Guest, My Customer, Exceeding Client Expectations, courses like that. So I walked into our customer service training with you thinking I knew it. I had the background. I knew what I was talking about. But regardless of what I knew, I didn't know enough. And it was all of the skills that you brought to the forefront of that training that made me realise we didn't have clear values and it wasn't documented. So regardless of what my background and how many training courses I had sat through, that was the one that stared at me, that it was something that, and why I ranked it so low at the end, because we have not got it documented and it was something that we need to strive to do.
And you know, Carissa, for me, I'm so pleased that you talk about values, because they are the foundations of the customer service strategy. And we often hear the word customer service strategy, but it's not often that we're given a formula to create a strategy. And whilst you're right, it'd be very rare that a new employee doesn't have some foundations. But the reality of it is that your values in Kit Home have been formed in your DNA over a variety of influencers, founders, CEOs, managing directors who have improved and tweaked and have made those values different to any other company. So whilst they may have values that they've brought along with them, and some of them might be fantastic, there might still be a gap between what you value at Kit Home and what they have learned. And so I'm really pleased that you talked about values. I'm also pleased because whilst there is a lot of formulas that generate customer service strategies, and we talked about a very simple formula so that it makes it easy for everybody to join the cause. And that simple formula was identify the values, work out how to communicate them, and then find a way of measuring. How do we make certain that we're moving forward? Very simple, and yet one that is not often discussed. So values is the foundation, and I'm so happy that it's become part of this dialogue that we're having today. So if I was to say to you then, at the end of the program, what was the key 3 takeaways that you walked away with?
Yes, we had to write 3. So my first one, I noted to be conscious of timeframes for the returning of phone calls and emails. It sounds simple and very basic, but I wanted that to be at the forefront of my mind because it was honed in again that if we don't give a customer a response in the timeframe they're looking for, it will blow out of proportion. So what might have been a small issue then can become a lot bigger. So that was one that I wanted to concentrate on. So that was one of my making it happen plan items. The next takeaway was to ensure that all team members, including myself, could demonstrate the 9. Well, we originally had 8, but we added an extra step for handling complaints. So that was my second key takeaway. And my third was, it was only 2 words, positive attitude. But what I meant when I wrote that down was it not just for me to have a positive attitude, but for the entire team as well. We all work remotely now. So whilst we can talk on the phone or on Teams or Zoom, which is fantastic, it's just crucial that we all do stay positive because any negativity that could come across in our voices or our day-to-day communications, clients will pick up on it as well. So positive attitude was one of my takeaways, to make sure that we can all have a smile in our voice when we're talking to our clients and all of the team together. Yeah.
And just for the benefit of the audience, I'll clarify a point that Carissa made, which is whilst we make a commitment to our clients to get back to them within a certain period of time, there are times where we just don't have the answer. And the agreement that we made as part of our minimum expectations is that even if we don't have the answer, we still find the courage to call them and say, I promised I would call you today. Whilst I don't have the answer, I wanted to keep you informed. This is what I'm doing to get you that answer. The other point that you made, Carissa, which is there was originally 8 steps and now there are 9 steps. They're one of the many benefits of speaking the same language when it comes to customer service strategy. So because we had a group who was now speaking the same language, understood the terminologies, understood the difference between a suspect and an evangelist, and we're all on the same dialect, we were able to then say, hey, now that we understand how the formula works, one of our participants from one of our portfolio companies put his hand up and said, why don't we add a step number 9? And as a result of that, we all looked at the step. We all had the same values on the day, and we could decide that it was a good step. Yeah. So we've improved the formula. So it's an organic formula. Everything that we're doing is organic, and it's easy to improve on it when all these mad scientists that are trying to solve or find a cure for this problem that we all have are speaking the same language. So that was really cool. And the last point that you made, the attitudinal pyramid that we covered, I think it's a very subjective point, because it's something that's very hard to measure, attitude. Yeah. And yet, what we all agreed was that most companies, and you had some examples yourself where you were in an industry that's well known for how much they prioritize customer service. So most companies provide customer service training. So why is it that often we find that training doesn't filter through to the actions and the behaviors of the people who are face-to-face with the clients? And often it's not the fact that they don't know the information. Is either A, they're afraid to use the information, or B, they are having some personal distractions themselves, like everybody has from time to time. And as a result of that, they're not channeling that information and they're not delivering on that training. So all the training in the world is kind of irrelevant unless we can get people to act it out. And I think that training is a great sugar hit, right? We all get the sugar hit, but it's the transformation that comes after the training, how we implement, how often we talk about it, how it becomes part of our day-to-day environment that will actually determine if the information has an impact or not. Really cool. Have you had a chance to, talking about practical application, next question is, have you had a chance to practically apply the material? And if so, what particularly have you applied?
I have, and fortunately, it was the day after, so I was still on the sugar high as such. I had all of the information with me, fresh at the forefront of my mind. Got back to the office on the Wednesday morning after being in Pymble on the Tuesday. First phone call was a complaining client, and it did catch me a little bit off guard because I wasn't prepared for it, but I stopped and I listened, and all of a sudden I could hear in the back of my head all of these things. Yeah, listen, do this. And I thought, okay, this is it. So first phone call, it was a client from Tassie who they were installing their windows and all of the openings in their wall frames were the wrong size. So this client was particularly upset because he's an owner builder, and everything came to a standstill, basically, grinding halt. He couldn't put windows in. So I thought to myself, I'm going to listen, which I did. I empathised with him. So the 9 steps I did modify because I was doing it on the fly and I was a little bit unprepared. But I asked him if I could take notes. And even though we were on the phone, that was something I've never done before. I've often commented to clients, I'm just writing this down, just bear with me whilst I'm writing this down. But I've never asked for their permission to take notes. And I said, if you could just bear with me, Luke, is it okay if I just take some notes? And there was dead silence again, but he gave me his approval. And I said, I just want to make sure that I've got everything clear, that I'm not making any presumptions, and that everything is correct. So I took my notes. He repeated it again for me, which was very nice of him. I read it back for him. And I then explained to him what is going to happen from here. What was my action plan? How to get this problem fixed? I didn't take fault for the problem, and I guess that's one of the hardest things, because we want to try to make everything better, but at some point we have to protect our company and not take fault all the time. So I didn't take fault, but told him I would be following up with the supplier of those frames what I was going to be doing, and I asked him if that was satisfactory to him, and he said yes. He totally agreed that that was the best plan of attack. I then gave him a proposed time frame of when I was going to come back with an update or a resolution as such. So I couldn't solve it straight away, only because we were in the hands of then the supplier of those wall frames. Had to wait for them to come back to me. But the steps of how I did it, like I said, I did modify them, but to do it the day after, I was quite prepared, and it surprised me. Everything that I could recall really quickly, it really did. It helped, and he was very cool and calm. So I think that was a testament to itself, because at the start he was not a very happy chappy, and by the end he thanked me for my time and for following it through. So that worked well.
I think a really important point that you make is there's a distinction between showing empathy and admitting liability, right? And we cover that in the training, that we do want to show empathy, but it's inadequate to admit any liability for a variety of reasons, and in particular because we need to do some research. But that distinction is such an important, especially for anyone who might have been taking the call who doesn't have your level of experience, because in order to try to please the client, they might accept liability. So we make a big distinction between the two, and empathy does not equal accepting liability. Very, very good. And the other interesting point for me is that, I don't know if you recall, but we had some objectives that we talked about early in the training. And one of those objectives was to get everybody who participated by the end of the program to what we call the consciously competent level, where by the end of the program, you can deliver the material and you've got to think about it, but you can deliver it, which is exactly what you've just explained. You had to think really hard about it. You might have missed a few details, but you were at a place where you could deliver it. What's going to happen now, and this is where the responsibility shifts from the training responsibility to the coaching responsibility, is that your next step now is unconsciously competent, where you've delivered the information, and not necessarily because you've had to deliver the information to other complaining customers, but it could be that you're delivering the information as a training program for your team. It could be that you're creating a induction manual for your new recruits, and as a result of that, you have to document the information. So all of that is going to get you to a place where you've repeated it enough times that it becomes unconsciously competent. You don't have to think about it anymore. And the beauty of that stage, when we get our team members there, is because they don't have to think about the next word that they're delivering, they're able to actually think about what the client has just said and how do I manage that. Where typically when we are delivering information, we're so caught up in having to think about every word that we say that we can't do much more. But when we get to that next level, unconsciously competent, you can be thinking about a variety of answers and information that will be helpful to this dialogue that you couldn't think about before because you were so caught up in the process. Great. One last question for you, and I promise you that's the end of the Spanish Inquisition that I'm putting you through. Have you considered how you can pass on the information now to other members of the team, be it a new member that you hire in the future or be an existing team member that makes part of your existing group?
Look, there's so much content that we need to pass on. And I think from my perspective, rather than trying to tackle it all at once, I mean, obviously we got through a lot of content in one training day, but to then pass it on to the team, I'm going to try to break it down. And literally that 9 steps as far as handling complaints is actually what I did put on my takeaway of making it happen as one of those points, those 9 steps of handling customer complaints. And that's the one I want to start with. I think obviously I started with it, so I think the team can relate to it as well. Not saying that we get complaints every day, I'm not saying that at all, but it's something that they can relate to. And because it's 9 steps, we can really easily just put dot points. I can type it up for them, and here's 9 points. We can run through it in our weekly meeting on a Tuesday or Wednesday, whichever one we choose. And then they can print it off. This is my thought. They can print this piece of paper off, stick it up on their wall or on the bottom of their monitor, and they're dot points. So it's not a whole explanation. We'll have done that in our meeting. But if we can just do the 9 dot points, if they have this situation come up, because I know it would have been beneficial for me, you can quickly look at the bottom of your screen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you know where you're up to. And it will just help prompt them. And I think they'll feel more comfortable doing that as well, because they're not flying solo. Something's there with them to help prompt them along the way. So that will be my first cab off the rank, literally, to do that one for them.
Well, and I'm really confident that they're going to take to it, because, if we take the coaching responsibility, which is what you've now taken on by default, it has many aspects to it. One is you need to be a great trainer in order to pass on the information. So you need to be able to deliver the information in such a way that they want to absorb it. But then secondly, you need to be able to demonstrate, because there's no better way of learning for someone who's trying a new skill than to see someone do it. And the fact that you've used the material and you can say, this is what happened when I did this, and this is what happened when I suggested that I would take notes. The material has a whole level of credibility that it couldn't have if you were just purely asking them to do it without talking from a place of experience. So from a coaching perspective, we know that the coaching process is made up of four very simple steps, which is prepare, present, try out, and follow up. And where a lot of coaches fail is they can't present. And the reason they can't present is because they haven't practically ever applied it. And that's where the whole program loses credibility. So when we see all these other companies, not us, who have had training programs, but for one reason or another, it doesn't filter through to the employee or the team member who's facing the customer, one of the reasons is because it's never been demonstrated to them. I'm really pleased for you, really pleased for Kid Home, and really thankful that you've taken the time to share that with us. I know that we're going to catch up on a monthly basis, because part of my responsibility to you is to be your advocate for 20 minutes a month, and I suppose have a dialogue that keeps us both in the same journey. So Once again, absolutely legendary. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be able to go to Sydney, and to Carol, because she obviously had to allow it as well. But the opportunity to go and experience it was really good. And I think too, it's always a good sign of a productive and a great day when we're sharing a ride back to the airport with some other team members who are flying back up north. And the whole way, the trip to the airport, conversation was non-stop, exchanging thoughts and all these light bulb moments that were coming on. You could feel the energy in the cab getting back to the airport. So thank you for that opportunity, because it was really good.
Well, to let you into my secret, there's a rule in influence called the rule of social proof, which I know you probably talked about it. And my intention of interviewing you today is certainly to help others get excited about it, because there's no better way of, getting someone excited by getting someone who's attended to say it rather than, the organizer to say it. So thank you very much for all that great feedback. And I hope that the people who are present in this strategy meeting, all the stakeholders, can make a commitment at some stage in their journey to, make the investment to have all of their teams participate as you have, and make the same investment that Carol had to make, which is never an easy investment, because, you had to fly in, I think you stayed overnight the night before. Fantastic. Thanks again, and see you at our next monthly catch-up.
Beautiful. Thanks, Walter.
Bye.